I never believed in the phrase career-defining moment until the night I ruined a 6-year-old's Christmas. It wasn't planned. I wasn't gunning for promotion or some Machiavellian corporate maneuver. It just happened. And yet, here I am, months later, still replaying every second of that night like a glitching film reel, trying to piece together where things shifted, where my life veered off its predictable, safe track and turned into something else entirely. December at Harrow and Lane is always a study in contrasts. On one hand, we're a mid-sized marketing firm, young, hungry, always selling innovation. On the other, our CEO, Michael Carmichael, Mike to his friends, Mr. Carmichael to the rest of us, is obsessed with the old-school trappings of company culture. That's why every December he hosts a sprawling, over-the-top Christmas party at his estate, a mansion on the edge of the city with enough glass and chrome to make a Bond villain feel underdressed. Attendance isn't mandatory, technically, but everyone goes. You don't skip Mike's party unless you're actively job hunting. I'd been with the company for a little over 2 years, mostly shuffling along in my safe little corner of the digital campaigns department. I wasn't gunning for glory. I liked my work, liked my team, and I wasn't naive enough to think my boss even knew my name. My plan for the party was simple. Show up, nurse a couple of drinks, avoid saying anything stupid, and leave before the karaoke machine came out. What I hadn't planned on was being drafted into child wrangling duty. It started innocuously enough. Mike was making his rounds, a crystal glass of spiced Cabernet in hand, when he spotted me by the buffet table. "You," he said, pointing at me like he was summoning a minion. "Good with kids, right?" I hesitated, cookie halfway to my mouth. "Ah, show." He clapped me on the shoulder with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Great. Help out with the kid zone. Keep them entertained. Santa's in there somewhere, but he's on his 3rd bourbon already." I laughed because I thought I was supposed to. Of course, Mr. Carmichael. That's how I ended up in a side room of the mansion with about a dozen sugar-high kids, an overwhelmed nanny, and enough glitter glue to carpet the floor. It wasn't so bad at first. I crouched with a group of them around a long craft table, helping them decorate sugar cookies into unrecognizable blobs of frosting and sprinkles. I was in the middle of showing a little girl how to make a snowman face when I felt a tug on my sleeve. "Hey," said a boy, maybe 6 or 7, his hair a shock of sandy blonde. His voice was small, conspiratorial. "Do you think Santa's real?" I didn't even think. No filter, no hesitation. I just said it. "Nah, but it's fun to pretend, right?" The words had barely left my mouth when I saw his face crumble. His lower lip trembled, and his big blue eyes filled with tears like I'd just told him his puppy had died. Time seemed to slow. My brain screamed at me to fix it, but the damage was already done. "Oh no. Hey, buddy," I stammered, but he was already running, a wail ripping from his throat as he bolted for the door. I stood frozen, frosting-stained spatula still in hand, as the room descended into awkward silence. The nanny shot me a look that could curdle milk. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she hissed. "No," I whispered, though of course I did. "That was Ethan," she said, her voice dropping to a horrified whisper. "Mike's son." My stomach plummeted. It was like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. The CEO's kid. Of course I'd just obliterated the cherished childhood illusion of the man who essentially owned my future. I might as well have handed in my resignation right there. I barely had time to process before a sharply dressed assistant appeared in the doorway. "He wants to see you," she said. Her expression gave away nothing, which was somehow worse. My legs felt like lead as I followed her through the sprawling house. Every step echoed with the dull, relentless drumbeat of my pulse. I pictured my career collapsing in real time, my name on the next round of layoffs, my keycard deactivated, my pathetic severance package. By Monday, everyone would know. Hell, by tomorrow, I'd be the office cautionary tale. Don't be like him. Don't kill Santa. We stopped before a set of double doors. The assistant knocked once, then ushered me in. Mike was alone, seated in a leather armchair beside a roaring fireplace. The flames cast his face in shifting amber light, making it hard to read his expression. He didn't offer me a seat. He didn't offer me a drink. He just stared at me for a beat too long before finally speaking. "You told my son the truth," he said. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. I swallowed hard. "Mr. Carmichael, I didn't mean to upset him. He held up a hand. "Nobody in this company tells the truth. They tell me what they think I want to hear. They nod, they smile, they pretend." He leaned forward slightly. "But you just said it. No hesitation. No spin." I blinked, unsure where this was going. "So, I like that," he said finally, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "I need someone like that on my innovation team. Someone who doesn't overthink, who can cut through the noise." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. My heart, which had been hammering a funeral dirge, stuttered in confusion. "You want me on the innovation team?" "That's right," he said. "We're pitching bold ideas this quarter. No more playing it safe. I think you'll fit." I must have looked like an idiot, standing there with my mouth slightly open. Thank you, sir." He waved a hand dismissively, already looking past me. Go enjoy the party. We'll talk Monday. And just like that, I was dismissed. I stumbled out of the study in a daze. Around me, the party continued in full swing. Colleagues laughing too loudly, spouses clinking glasses, carols blasting over hidden speakers. It all felt strangely distant, like I was underwater. I kept expecting someone to stop me, to tell me it was a mistake, that I was still fired. But no one did. By the time I got home that night, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a hollow unease. I'd walked into that study convinced my career was over. Instead, I'd been offered a seat at the table I'd never even dared to aspire to. And all because I'd told a 6-year-old the truth. Mike's words echoed in my mind long after I collapsed into bed. Nobody in this company tells the truth. I should have been relieved. Thrilled, even. But as I stared at the ceiling in the dark, all I felt was an unfamiliar chill creeping along my spine, like I'd just been handed a gift I didn't quite understand. A week later, I walked into my first meeting as the newest member of the innovation team. Every head turned as I entered. A couple of people exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Someone muttered something under their breath that sounded like Saint Nick Slayer, followed by a stifled laugh. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the prickling at the back of my neck. I'd gotten what people in this company fought tooth and nail for, an invitation to the inner circle. So why did it feel like I'd just stepped onto thin ice? If you had told me a month earlier that I'd be on Harrow and Lane's innovation team, the so-called nerve center of the company, I would have laughed in your face. People spent years clawing their way onto that team. I'd stumbled into it because I told a 6-year-old the truth about Santa Claus. But any illusions of a clean, merit-based promotion evaporated within a week. From the moment I walked into that glass-walled conference room for my first Monday briefing, I knew I wasn't welcome. 8 pairs of eyes turned to me as I stepped inside, their gazes sharp and appraising. The room was a cross between a war room and a fishbowl, sleek and sterile, with a panoramic view of the city skyline behind Mike's empty chair at the head of the table. Everyone was dressed in muted power tones, their tablets and notepads neatly aligned before them. I offered what I hoped was a confident smile. Morning. A few murmured responses, tight-lipped and perfunctory. A man in a navy suit, late 30s, sharp jawline, slick-back hair, leaned back in his chair, giving me a slow once-over like I was a substitute teacher he didn't respect. New guy, he said flatly. Yay. Alex, I replied. He smirked. We know who you are. You're the Saint Nick Slayer. A few people chuckled, low and humorless. I forced a laugh, trying not to let the nickname sting. I'd overheard it whispered in the hallways all week, a cruel little in-joke that had followed me like a shadow. The man's name, I later learned, was Colin, a senior strategist and unofficial second-in-command. He had the kind of easy confidence that comes from years of being untouchable. He also made it clear from day one that he considered me an intruder. Mike'll be here in a minute, he said, turning back to his notes. Try to keep up. The meeting was a blur of jargon and high-stakes brainstorming, punctuated by the occasional pointed glance in my direction. I spent most of it trying to decode the unspoken dynamics, who deferred to whom, which alliances ran deepest, and who was clearly waiting for me to fail. When Mike finally swept into the room 20 minutes late, the temperature shifted. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Everyone straightened in their seats, the easy arrogance replaced with brittle attentiveness. Let's hear some ideas, Mike said, settling into his chair. His gaze flicked to me briefly, an unreadable glint in his eyes. Fresh blood first. Alex. A dozen expectant faces turned toward me. My mind blanked. I hadn't been briefed, hadn't had time to prepare anything groundbreaking. I was thinking about leveraging micro-influencer networks for the upcoming. Safe, Mike interrupted, his voice cutting through mine like a blade. Everyone here thinks safe. That's why we're stagnant. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his stare pinning me in place. You're here because you don't play along. You don't pretend. So give me something real, Alex. No bullshit. Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. I opened my mouth, hesitated, then heard myself say, we're wasting resources chasing campaigns that mean nothing to the people we're trying to reach. Half our pitches are cosmetic. We focus so much on what looks bold that we forget what actually connects. A silence settled over the table, thick and uncomfortable. Mike's mouth curved into a slow smile. Finally, someone willing to call it. Colin's jaw tightened. A woman across the table scribbled something on her notepad with unnecessary force. Good, Mike said, leaning back. That's why you're here. No one else in this room would say that to me. After the meeting, Colin cornered me by the elevators. Word of advice, he said, his tone deceptively casual. People who come in here swinging usually don't last. Mike likes fresh meat because it shakes things up. Then he spits it out when he's done. I'm just trying to do my job, I said carefully. He smirked. Keep telling yourself that, Saint Nick Slayer. The weeks that followed were a crash course in corporate bloodsport. I quickly learned that the innovation team wasn't about innovation at all, it was about proximity to Mike. Every meeting was a test, every offhand comment a potential landmine. People smiled to your face and gutted you the moment you turned your back. I started catching fragments of whispered conversations as I passed by closed offices. Golden boy, fast track, dead man walking. Meanwhile, Mike kept singling me out. At one meeting, he asked me to call out the dead weight in our current campaigns. When I hesitated, his eyes hardened. I put you here because you tell the truth, Alex. Don't start lying now. I swallowed hard, then pointed out 3 projects that were underperforming. The fallout was immediate, 2 team leads were reassigned, and a third was let go entirely. I walked out of that meeting with a target the size of a bullseye on my back. The nickname Saint Nick Slayer stopped being a joke and became something darker, a brand. Every time I entered a room, conversations faltered. People started CCing me on fewer emails, inviting me to fewer strategy dinners. One evening, I stayed late to catch up on work. As I passed by Colin's office, I heard my name through the half-open door. Kid's not gonna last. Mike's using him to clear the board. Then it's back to business as usual. A pause, then a low chuckle. Let him burn. Saves us the trouble. I froze, heart pounding. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The more time I spent around Mike, the more unsettled I became. He had this unnerving ability to make you feel seen, like he could read every thought flickering through your head. One-on-one, he was magnetic, even charming. But there was always an edge to it, a sense that every word you spoke was being weighed and catalogued. One afternoon, he called me into his office. Walk with me, he said, rising from behind his desk. We moved through the halls in silence until we reached a secluded corner overlooking the city. You know why I promoted you, Alex? He asked. I hesitated. Because I told your son the truth. He smiled faintly. Partly, but mostly because I needed someone unaligned. This team's been rotting from the inside. Politics, egos, people too comfortable protecting their turf. You're a disruptor. No loyalties, no baggage. I'm just trying to do good work, I said carefully. And you will. As long as you remember one thing. In this company, perception is reality. People will hate you because you don't play their game. Let them. You're here because I like the way you think. Don't make me regret that. As he walked away, leaving me alone with the view, a cold knot formed in my gut. I'd wanted clarity. Instead, I got a threat wrapped in a compliment. By February, the pressure was suffocating. I was working 12-hour days, constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting an HR email with termination in the subject line. I started dreaming about the Christmas party, the moment everything changed, over and over. Only in the dream, it wasn't even asking me if Santa was real. It was Mike, his cold, appraising eyes fixed on mine as he repeated the question. Do you think I'm real? The answer, of course, was no. The breaking point came at the quarterly review. Mike had ordered a full audit of our active campaigns, and I knew my earlier critiques had put several projects in the firing line. As we went around the table, I felt the weight of every gaze on me, the air thick with unspoken hostility. Alex, Mike said finally, what's your verdict? I hesitated, then forced the words out. Half these campaigns are dead weight. We're burning resources to maintain appearances. If we want to stay competitive, we need to cut them. Silence. Then Mike nodded once. Done, he said. Effective immediately. The bloodletting was swift. By the end of the week, 3 senior team members were out. My inbox flooded with icy, one-line farewells. Colin's smirk when he passed my desk said it all. You're next. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I'd gotten everything I was supposed to want, a meteoric rise, Mike's approval, a seat at the most powerful table in the company. So why did it feel like I was being fattened for slaughter? By March, the writing was on the wall, even if no one would say it out loud. I'd become the blunt instrument Mike used to dismantle the innovation team. 3 senior members were gone, their projects axed, their offices cleared out overnight like they'd never existed. What remained was a skeleton crew. Colin, 3 others who barely concealed their contempt for me, and me, the guy who'd done the cutting. Everywhere I went, I could feel their eyes on me, hear the muttered conversations that trailed off when I entered the room. It wasn't paranoia. I'd been briefed on enough exit strategies to know how quickly careers could be erased here. The nickname that had once been a joke, Saint Nick Slayer, had metastasized into something venomous. Now it was whispered with the same bitter edge people reserve for traitors. It was late one Thursday when I found an anonymous note slipped under my office door. Watch your back. You're next. No signature. No context. Just those 3 words scrawled in hurried, almost frantic handwriting. I stared at it for a long time, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, before tucking it into my desk drawer. I didn't need to ask who had sent it. Everyone on the team had a reason to want me gone. The next morning, Mike called me into his office. "You're making waves," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "I'm just doing my job," I replied carefully. "That's what the last three said before they imploded." He leaned back, studying me with that unreadable gaze of his. "You're not like them, though. You're not afraid to get your hands dirty." I forced a smile. I tried to be direct. "That's why I like you, Alex. Everyone else is too busy pretending. You tell the truth." I wanted to believe that was still a compliment, but the words had begun to sound like a sentence. A week later, Colin cornered me in the parking garage. "Mike's going to burn you," he said without preamble. I frowned. "You've been saying that since day one." "Because it's true," he snapped. "He used you to clean house. Now the board's breathing down his neck about the turnover, and guess who gets to take the fall?" I swallowed hard. "Me." He smiled thinly. "Bingo. You're the perfect scapegoat. New guy, no allies, trail of bodies behind you. When this blows up, you'll be the one holding the knife." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't like being collateral damage. And because maybe, just maybe, I'd rather take Mike down with you than watch him tighten the noose." He handed me a slim envelope before walking away. Inside were printouts, internal memos, financial reports, and something that made my blood run cold. Emails showing that every dead-weight project I'd recommended cutting had been deliberately sabotaged. Not by me. By Mike. I wasn't the axe. I was the alibi. 2 days later, I was summoned to an emergency board meeting. The atmosphere was electric with hostility. Half a dozen board members sat in a semicircle, their faces carved from stone. Mike lounged at the head of the table, his expression a mask of pained disappointment. "Alex," one of the board members began, "do you know why you're here?" I cleared my throat. "I assume it's about the restructuring." A woman on the far end slid a folder across the table toward me. Inside were performance reports, all damning. Every terminated project had tanked in its final quarter. Every cut had been recommended by Alex Monroe, my name highlighted in accusatory yellow. "This pattern is concerning," she said coolly. "It suggests either gross negligence or something more deliberate." I looked up, my pulse pounding. I didn't sabotage those projects. I only reported what I saw. Mike sighed theatrically. "Alex, I brought you onto this team because I believed you could be honest with me. But if you've been compromising our work—" "That's not what happened," I said sharply. "You told me to call out the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. That's all I did." He spread his hands, all wounded innocence. "And look where that's gotten us." It was masterful. He'd orchestrated the whole thing so perfectly that by the time I realized I was being thrown under the bus, the wheels were already turning. After the meeting, I barged into Mike's office, adrenaline surging. "You set me up," I said, slamming the folder onto his desk. He didn't even flinch. "Of course I did." The casualness of it knocked the wind out of me. "You needed a fall guy," I said, my voice shaking. "I needed someone unaligned," he corrected. "Someone who could clean house without questioning why the house needed cleaning. Now the board has a name to feed the wolves, and I have a clean slate." I stared at him, incredulous. "You used me." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You knew the rules, Alex. Perception is reality. They perceive you as reckless, expendable, the source of our instability. That's all that matters." "I told the truth," I said bitterly, "and that's why you'll take the fall. People don't want the truth. They want someone to blame." I left his office in a daze, Colin's envelope burning a hole in my bag. I spent that night combing through every document, every incriminating email. Together, they painted a damning picture of Mike's deliberate sabotage, inflated budgets, falsified projections, and a paper trail designed to funnel blame directly to me. The next morning, I sent an anonymous package to the board with everything inside. I don't know what I expected, vindication, maybe, or at least a stay of execution. Instead, 2 days later, I received an email from HR. "Your position at Harrow and Lane has been terminated effective immediately. Please return your keycard and company property within 48 hours. No explanation. No appeal." A week later, News broke that the board had unanimously reaffirmed confidence in CEO Michael Carmichael following an internal review. In the same breath, they announced the appointment of a new director of strategic innovation, Colin. I sat in my apartment, the termination email still open on my laptop, as the realization washed over me. Colin had played me just as expertly as Mike had. He'd fed me just enough rope to hang myself and clear his own path to the top. The envelope of evidence? A carefully curated selection, damning enough to implicate me but not enough to touch Mike. I was never a disruptor. I was the distraction. It's been 3 weeks since my firing. My professional reputation is radioactive. No one in the industry will touch me. My name is synonymous with reckless incompetence, the guy who tanked half a dozen projects in record time. Sometimes, late at night, I replay the moment that started it all, the little boy tugging at my sleeve, his small voice asking, "Do you think Santa's real?" I'd answered without hesitation, "Nah, but it's fun to pretend, right?" Now I understand the irony. In Mike's world, everyone pretends. They pretend to believe in vision statements and innovation pipelines and the myth of corporate loyalty. I was the only one who didn't play along. And for that, I became the perfect villain. Last night, I got a message from an unknown number. "You told the truth. That's why you lost. M." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Somewhere, in his glass-walled office high above the city, Mike was probably raising a glass to another victory. And me? I'm the ghost of a career that never really existed, haunted by the question I can't stop asking myself. If I'd just lied, just once, would I still have a future?